Hello, Dr. Smith here, and I'm going to be your tour guide through the CalTPA Performance Assessment Guide for Cycle 1. I'm going to walk you through this document because it is critical that you understand what the assessment guide does and how it can help you so you can pass the CalTPA. It outlines all of the requirements for the assessment. You need to pass the CalTPA for credentialing purposes, so it's really important that you understand this resource that you have. So I'm going to scroll through the assessment guide and tell you about all of the important items that are here and that can help you. So we're going to scroll down, and the first thing I'm going to note is the version 4 on the first page. It's important to look at that so you know you are using the most current version of the assessment guide. As of July 2021, it switched to version 4. Every year it has changed, so right now we're on version 4, and it's important to note that you are using the right document. So scrolling down, on this next page, we see the preamble. This is important to understand what the purpose of the teaching performance assessment is. So you can read through that so you understand why you're doing all of this and the connection to the teaching performance expectations, the TPEs, which you should be familiar with through your teacher preparation program. Oh, I almost scrolled past this. This is important to know. If you need any help, technical questions, how to submit to the Pearson website, all of that you can get here. It tells you exactly where to go. It has links to their contact page so you can get your questions answered. The next thing is the table of contents. This is a great tool because it is a linked PDF. So if you open this 50-page document and you don't want to scroll through everything, you want to go straight to, let's say, the lesson plan and learn more about what you need to do for the lesson plan, you can simply click lesson plan and it takes you to page 12 of this document. So you can do that for all of these items in the table of contents. You see that it's the assessment guide is structured. It gives you an overview of everything so you get a sense of the big picture. Then it goes into great detail about each step. So the CalTPA cycles are divided into 4 steps, one leading to the next, and it's a cycle leading back to step 1. So the first step is to plan. You plan what you're going to teach. Step 2, teach and assess. So you're actually going to teach that lesson and assess how the learning is going. And then you're going to step 3, reflect. How did it go? And then step 4, apply. What are you going to do next? Then in the assessment guide, it goes through the rubrics. Rubrics are really important because that's how you are being scored. So you want to know exactly how your evidence that you're submitting is scored. And the next, actually submitting your evidence. This assessment guide gives you great information about exactly how to prepare your evidence, what to submit, and how to do it. And finally, you have the glossary. The glossary is important so you know the terms. And you might think you have an understanding of the terms of the CalTPA. Well, the glossary makes sure that you understand it through the lens of the CalTPA. So it's important to know how they define a certain term. And we'll talk more about that when we get to that section. Scrolling down, acknowledgments, who helped and developed this. It's very important to know that this wasn't just thrown together. A lot of time went into putting together this assessment. Okay, so the overview. This gives you a really good sense of what Cycle 1 is and what you need to do. You can see there's hyperlinks to the glossary. So if you are not certain what they mean, let's say about assets, student assets, what could those be? click that link and it will take you to the glossary and define that for you. It also gives you some ideas of what kind of assets you could really build on in your class. And here's a nice graphic to show you those 4 steps and one leading to the next in a cycle. Scrolling down, here you see our first green box. These boxes have information that's really important. So it's in a different color, it's in a call out box for a reason. They want you to understand exactly what this is, whatever the topic is. You'll see these green boxes throughout the assessment guide. Definitely read them. They let you know what they mean, and they also give you ideas as you are developing your work for Cycle 1. Here it defines UDL, and it gives you an idea that UDL is pretty important in the CalTPA. So having an understanding of UDL is necessary. Then we get an overview of each step. Step 1, plan. And here you see another green call out box. Then step 2, 3, and 4. Again, this is just the overview, so it's fairly short. It's just giving you big picture. It also talks about, it includes focus students. You are going to need focus students for Cycle 1, and it gives you an overview of what to expect for that. Here's another big call out box. This is for multiple subject candidates. And you get a lot of overview of this information that you need to know to be able to be successful in the CalTPA. So this is a nice part of the assessment guide because it's in the overview, it has a table. So this is an evidence table. What step it's in, what do you need to do, and what evidence needs to be submitted. So you can see for step 1, planning, it tells you exactly what you need to do. It highlights or bolds a critical point so you don't forget it. Take note of that. When they bold or do a call out box, that means it's pretty important. And here's the evidence. So you know that you need to do a written narrative of getting to know your students. No more than 9 pages. Part B, you're going to do a lesson plan. Part C, a lesson plan rationale, basically explaining why you made the decisions you did in your lesson plan. And then any related instructional resources and materials, and that would be anything necessary to teach that lesson. No more than 8 pages. And then it goes through everything. The next part of the assessment guide explains everything in more detail. So now you get a sense of what you need to do and evidence you have to submit. And now the assessment guide goes into detail. What is step 1 plan? This tells you everything you need to know. It has those call out boxes. The first item you're going to be working on is getting to know your students. It has directions for you. And you scroll down. This is all the information you need to provide. So you can start taking notes and putting this together. There is a template for these items you need to submit to Pearson, but the template gives you prompts. It doesn't explain what exactly needs to be included. So here in the assessment guide, you get more information. So for instance, if you are filling out a template and you don't know exactly what to write or how to write it, you come over to the assessment guide and you look at that section and read it. And you might want to read it a couple times so you really understand what they're asking for. And we scroll down. Now, focus students. You have to choose 3 focus students. This section of the assessment guide helps you with understanding, okay, who should I choose? What's the best way to describe them? What information do I need to know about the students? So it's really helpful to read through this. And it goes through Focus Student 1, as you can see, Focus Student 2, and then Focus Student 3. You can look at exactly what the expectations are. Next is the lesson plan. It explains the directions and the components that need to be in the lesson plan. So you can read through that. Then the lesson plan rationale, again, directions and what needs to be included. What do you need to explain in that rationale? It gives you really good information that goes beyond what the templates do in the prompts. Let's scroll through. Related instructional resources and materials, it gives you information, what examples of what that might be. It needs to be 8 pages, so you can start thinking about putting together all of the things necessary to teach that one lesson that you developed. Then it summarizes all of the evidence to be submitted for the planning step, the first step. So those are the things that need to be submitted. Then it goes just like step 1, it explains step 2. Step 2 is your video clip. So you've planned a lesson and now you're going to teach it. This tells you what needs to be in the video clips. There are 3 clips, up to 5 minutes long, no more than 5 minutes. So it gives you all the information you need to know about what should be seen in those video clips. It is important to know that before you teach the actual lesson. The reason is, if you teach the lesson and you miss one of the expectations here that that clip needs to have, you're basically going to have to redo it, or you're going to get a lower score. For example, in clip 3, it needs to have you explaining the next steps for student learning of the content. Well, let's say you don't have that in your lesson and you have no video of you at the end of a lesson summarizing and saying, you know, building on what we're doing today, tomorrow we're going to do XYZ related to the content. If you don't know in advance that that needs to be in there, then you could really miss out. So reading this before you actually teach helps you have a strong submission for Pearson. And here we go, another call out box. Definitely read all of those. They are important. Each video clip needs to be annotated. So this gives you all of the information you need about annotations. You have to use titles. It tells you all of the titles for your annotations that need to be there and what exactly you need to be describing or explaining in the annotations. Sometimes we sit down to write something and it feels forced or you're not getting great ideas. When that happens, come over to the performance assessment guide, read through this again. It might spark an idea. Okay, you get more information. Evidence to be submitted for step 2 is part E, the 3 annotated video clips. And then we go to reflect, step 3. It explains exactly what you need to do for that step. The evidence to be submitted, it's a reflection on what you learned. It's a template, no more than 3 pages. And then step 4, apply, where you're talking about now you've learned all this stuff, you've taught, you've planned, you taught, you reflected on it. Now what are you going to do next? And apply what you learned. And it explains everything you need to do, the evidence to be submitted, no more than 3 pages, or you can do a 5-minute video explanation. So that's the details about each step. Then the next part of the assessment guide is the rubrics. So it starts out with the essential questions. So these are the guiding questions for each rubric that you're being assessed on. It's good to know what the focus is. And these are the rubrics. Let's see. So the rubrics are really important because this is the actual rubric that you get scored on. This is what the assessors are looking at as they give you a score for each rubric of level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So you need to know all of the components that they're looking at. So start with level 3 and read through everything they expect, because that's where an assessor starts to look at your evidence. They go to that level 3 and see if all of these constructs, these little paragraphs, those are called constructs. So they look at each of those. So you can go through these rubrics and see if you are first see what they're going to expect, and then after you write your work, then see if you actually included all of those things, and then that will help you with revising. So you're going to want to do everything that's in level 3, 4, and 5 if you can, and read level 1 and 2 to see what you should not do. And all of the rubrics are in the assessment guide, and it shows you the sources of evidence, so you can see exactly what they're looking at when they score you on that particular rubric. So for rubric 1.1, they're going to look at these 4 pieces of evidence and give you a score. And you can see that through all of the rubrics. And I'm just going to scroll through them. You need to take time to read each one. So for instance, rubric 1.4 is focus student 3. As you are working on that, look at what you're going to be scored on, and make sure you meet those expectations. Okay, so there's the rubrics. There are 8 rubrics for cycle 1. And the next part of this is submitting your evidence. So it explains exactly how to prepare everything. You will want to look at this to make sure you do this correctly. Every time you submit the CalTPA cycle, it's $150. So you want to make sure you submit it correctly, because if you don't, you could get a condition code and have to resubmit. So it's important to know exactly how to prepare your evidence. It tells you about the templates, logging in. It has a call out box. Make sure you read those. And then it goes into what to submit. Sometimes instruction is in a different language, and so it explains the English translation if it's required or not. And this is a wonderful portion of the assessment guide because it gives you all of the specifications. So for part A, getting to know your students, these are the only files the type of file that you can submit, and then the minimum and maximum number of files. So you know you can only submit one document for this. And then the response length, no more than 9 pages. Really go by that response length. Do not go over. And if you find, let's say here, it's no more than 9 pages and you only have 3 pages, that's a really good indicator that you probably don't have enough detail in your work. So that response length is helpful for multiple reasons to really help guide your work. Additional information, so it says, okay, download a template, use Arial 11-point type, single space with 1-inch margins on the sides. So you don't want to change any of that, and you don't change any of the templates. You just fill in your answer, your writing in the specified area. So it goes through that for each step. What do you need to do? The additional information is really helpful just to make sure you're right on target with that. And then the final part of the assessment guide is the glossary. The glossary is extremely important. Sometimes we assume that we know exactly what a term means, and it's not always the same understanding or through the lens of CalTPA. So it's important to go through the glossary here. It not only defines terms, it also gives you ideas on how to strengthen that in your writing. So, it's in alphabetical order. And one example, I'll loop back to the example I talked about earlier, asset. So if you don't necessarily, you're trying to figure out how to build on your students' assets, and you're maybe you have a block, you're struggling on what to identify as their assets. Okay, it defines it here. And then it gives you different ideas. Assets include diversity in thinking, culture, traits, intelligences, unique experiences or skills. And then it gives you ideas. So you can really examine what you know about your students, or maybe you need to get to know your students better so you know their assets and you can build a lesson or plan a lesson that builds on those assets. So this is a really useful resource. Now, this document is quite long, but don't let that stop you from going through it. I encourage everybody to read this at least once and then use it as a resource and go to specific pages that you need to help you as you're writing. So this is 50 pages long, but it's full of all the information you need to be successful on the CalTPA. So I hope you have learned through this tour everything you can use as you're working on the CalTPA Cycle 1.